Welcome back to another episode of The Psychology of Black Womanhood, the place where research is really meeting the real world. I'm Dr. Dion Stevens, your host, and also the co-author of The Psychology of Black Womanhood and a psychology professor. In today's episode, we're looking at influencing with intention. In the digital sphere, there's birthed this new vibrant movement, plus-size Black women who are emerging not just as fashion influencers, but as powerful agents of representation. To explore this issue, we're talking with Dr. Regina Dulphy, whose research looks at how Black plus-size fashion influencers, from bloggers to Instagram trailblazers, are shaking the foundations of mainstream beauty ideals. Dr. Dulphy is an associate professor of English at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. She specializes in Black feminist, African American, and multimodal rhetorics. Her research examines the ways that marginalized people, particularly Black women, engage in subversive rhetorics of protest and resistance. We see these discussions about plus-size women and influencers and body. What sparked your interest really about plus-size fashion and body politics?
So I was not thinking about this in terms of my research initially. As I say in my article, I started out as body changes that happened in college. And so I was always sort of on the cusp of plus size. Yep. And then, like I say, firmly by the time I was in college and finishing college, was plus size. Right. And so I started following these influencers because I was just trying to figure out, what are we wearing? And at the time, it was lots of stuff targeted towards older women. So lots of floral prints and things that did not feel right for a 21, 22-year-old body. Right. And so I was trying to figure out, what am I going to wear? What will I feel cool and fashionable and modern in at the time where it felt like the options were very, very slim. And so that's sort of how I got into that part of it. But also, I just come from a family of Black women who are clothes, hair, nails, fashion. That is the thing that we've always done. Right. And so both of those things combined influenced my journey down this. And then as I was older and in graduate school and thinking about my work, I was sort of thinking about social media and the ways that Black women in particular are using social media. And this project sort of grew out of that, both a personal interest and also the sort of scholarly work I was doing at the time.
Just before we go further, for the listeners, can you define what you mean by a plus-size Black woman influencer, and specifically how they would differ from other women, like white women or other Black women who might not define as plus-size? Who are we talking about here?
I talk about women who self-identify, right? So self-identify as Black, self-identify as plus-size, although I, for myself, was thinking that I'm looking at women who are size 14 plus. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, this is the kind of thing where you write something and then you reflect, I would maybe go back and do this differently, where I think the ends of, not where I think the ends of plus size are, but thinking more critically about, I'm thinking about people who are sort of self-identifying as Black, self-identifying as plus size, and presenting themselves publicly in that way.
Why is it so important for us to look at fashion influencers and their role in shaping what you actually call disruptive Black bodies? And maybe you can also break into that. Why is it this social media technology so critical to understanding this?
Yeah, I think it's, for better or worse, where we're getting all of our information, or a lot of our information right now. It's everywhere, all of the time. It's where we're reading. It's where we're gathering and talking to each other. It's where we're learning. And again, I say this as for better or worse. Right. I think there are some positives there, but I also think that there are some pitfalls, and we've seen that increase over the last decade or so. I was interested in how people are taking these platforms that are widely accessible, and using it to shape and tell their own stories and build their audience somewhat organically based on shared experiences and knowledge and like ways of seeing and understanding the world. I think that is crucial and was crucial at the time. And I think now, as we're really beginning to think about how knowledge and information is shared in those spaces and circulated and engaged with, and who gets to shape and tell the stories, and in what ways are those stories reproducing and recreating harm, it feels even more of a critical and crucial matter now.
What do you mean by disruptive bodies in this space?
I was thinking a lot about sort of the beauty standards and norms that were imposed. And so like things like fashion magazines and the kinds of places where we were going for that kind of information was always sort of mediated and controlled by a standard and a norm that just did not align with what I looked like, with what people in my family looked like. And so I was thinking about how creating a sort of like independent visual self online allowed plus size Black women to sort of challenge and disrupt what those norms are and were. And so you sort of have these Vogue and Glamour and whatever these different magazines are that are like selling you a certain way of being and looking in the world, and you don't see yourself represented. You don't see the people that you think are beautiful. And not to say that like those norms and standards aren't beautiful, but there's only one kind of beautiful in the world. Right. And that felt really, really harmful to me. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's disruptive to say like, hey, I am fat, I am Black, and I am here, and I'm going to make you look at me, and I'm going to make you look at my clothes. And the thing that we are sort of always socially conditioned to do is hide the fat body or feel shame about the fat body. And so to say, actually, no, this is beautiful, and I'm going to make myself a thing or a person that you look at online. You can't escape it. And I'm saying that this is beautiful too, or is a different kind of beautiful, however you want to sort of frame it. I thought that was really sort of subversive in its way.
To me, plus size is basically size 12, size 13, which is what the average woman is. So could you break down what plus size means or doesn't mean and how it fits into your work?
Oh, gosh. That is a complicated and sort of ever-shifting question.
Right.
So there's different ways that I find that people are using the terms. And I think I say plus size in the article. And I think if I was going to go back and rewrite it now, I would have probably used fat instead of plus size. Oh. And so I think there's been sort of a reclaiming of the term fat, not using a euphemism or something. Right. And so I think that in language matters. I also think plus size has sort of lost its meaning, and that like people who are a size 6 are now saying that they are like mid-size plus size. And so there's been this sort of like trying to define the terms has become somewhat complicated and fraught. But I also think opening up some important conversations about how we think about bodies and whose bodies count, and what does it mean to try to live and exist in a body that the world doesn't really make space for.
When you're saying this, it reminds me of this idea of the commodification of body positivity right now. Mm-hmm. And so it's become marketable. Like you said, they're embracing plus size, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. Thinking about that specifically for Black women, how does race inform this whole discussion of plus size, particularly in online spaces?
Again, another sort of like complex and complicated area. And so there is a way that Black women's bodies have been marked as other and as non-human, or like a not quite right human. I'm currently working on a project with a colleague, and we're talking about the concept of like sexy and how that interfaces with misogyny. And so one of the areas that we've been thinking about is like Sarah Baartman, right? Sarah Baartman is an enslaved Black woman who is kidnapped and forced to like serve as a sort of like exotic sideshow throughout Europe. And part of that is because of her body and the way it's shaped, but also the ways that those features were exaggerated to make her look more other. And so thinking about how Black women sort of marked as like other or different or weird or deviant, whatever all of the terms are, and also a thing that people are drawn to both as spectacle and to try to consume and commodify is like really, really complicated. And so I think talking about Black women's bodies specifically and thinking about the ways that they take up space in the world in ways that are always fraught with all of these layers of like racism, sexism, makes it such that you can't really have a conversation that's just about clothes or makeup or hair or whatever, because all of those things are have been weaponized against Black women. So you sort of have to think about those things that seem somewhat surface level with this sort of like layers of history on top of them.
What happens to Black plus-size bodies when they refuse to be quiet or refuse to be apologetic or hyper-feminized in these online spaces by influencers?
So lots of like online trolling and attacks and doxing and those kinds of things in people's comments and posts and having their images shared to be ridiculed happens quite often.
I'm assuming it's not just like these are some white men who are doing it. There's a diversity in terms of the responses.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and this is where you sort of see that intersection of anti-fatness hitting against racism and sexism. So it's sort of coming from all of these different sides. And then if we added like, you know, queerness, transness, et cetera, to that, it brings in a whole other layer. It almost feels like everyone can sort of come out of the woodwork and talk about and say hateful things about not just people's bodies, but them as people in the world.
What about respectability politics? Is that playing into this in any way?
Yes. The use of respectability and respectability politics as a form of protection on its surface kind of makes sense. If you just do the things to conform and be seen as right in the world, and this is in quotes, that people will just leave you alone and let you live. But it doesn't work. It has never worked. I think people sort of saying that respectability is not the answer, and so I'm just going to live and be how I want to be in the world, and the world needs to change to accommodate me as opposed to I need to change to accommodate the world.
Right.
Feels like another one of those sort of subversive moves, but it's one that Black women have been engaged in for a long time. So I'm just talking about this as one small way in part of like a longer history of Black women's resistance.
What are some examples of genuine influencers or campaigns that you think have had an impact?
So it's hard to say, right? Because I think every time there's an attempt at creating something liberatory or subversive, I think that our systems sort of adapt to commodify. I think that Rihanna, when she came out with the Fenty, the Savage by Fenty line,
right,
and she was doing these fashion shows, and then you have like plus size people, disabled people, older people, like all different kinds of sizes, shapes, bodies, races. I thought that that was a moment where we could see like, oh, this is a shift that's happening. Is sort of running counter to or challenging the sort of hugeness of the Victoria's Secret fashion show, which was like the standard for what that kind of looked like for a long time. And so I thought like something like that was really powerful, but you can't disentangle that from capitalism, right? And so you can't disentangle that from something that has made Rihanna a billionaire.
Right, exactly.
And so it can be good in representation and bad in the fact that it's producing another commodity that then can be bought and sold.
Do you think, though, that something like Rihanna or these types of images are encouraging Black women who might be fitting into this label of fat or plus size to start presenting themselves in new ways in social media? Are you seeing shifts and changes?
I felt like I was for a time. I think there was a growth of plus size fashion bloggers. I thought that there were a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily even call themselves like influencers, but who were just like active online. And I thought people were sharing more.
I had that thought. So you don't think that way anymore, I guess.
So I think a couple of things have happened or changed. I think we're in this weird time with GLP-1s and Ozempic and that kind of stuff that I think is rolling back a little bit of the sort of like body positivity, where for a time I would be getting a lot more content from plus size fashion people. And now I get a lot more ads for Ozempic. And so I think that is, maybe a sign of a shift. And that's anecdotally based on like my, my own online stuff. But I also think that, and I think this might be just a shift in how influencing is working online, that a lot of people have moved from being sort of like niche, I do fashion, to doing more lifestyle type of content. And so it's like, yes, fashion is part of that, but it's also showing clothes and household and travel and all kinds of things. And that might also be a function of my algorithm. And so the influencers that I was following at the time have shifted their content a little bit because they've gotten older and their audience has grown with them. And so I think maybe, it's a combination.
So what advice then would you give to a young plus size creative? They read your article, they figure, what Dr. Dudley is the one to speak to. How would you advise them to find their voice in this digital world that often wants to flatten or tokenize them?
My gut said, keep doing what you're doing in a way that feels authentic and genuine and is what and how you want to represent yourself. And also maybe how you see yourself as like part of a community and want to share with that community and help build and be part of that community. I would love to say, like, just keep doing that. There's also a way that I'm thinking about how social media and like these digital platforms have gotten worse in like what they do with people's data and information, and what kinds of content and information they are pushing to users versus what is not. And so there's another part of me that says, maybe we need to build something else or be somewhere else or be in community with each other in different sorts of ways. And I think that requires a kind of more radical imagination that I don't necessarily even have right now. But like, what would it look like if we engaged with each other in different ways that wasn't mediated through social media?
It's funny, when I'm listening to you, I totally feel as a researcher, you've written this paper and then now you reflect and you're like, oh, when I look back at this, and then especially you're doing stuff in social media, technology, digital worlds, it changes so quickly. You write this article and within that time it's changed. So thinking ahead now, where are you going with your work?
Oh, goodness. So I have really pulled back from doing social media stuff, partially because of just the speed of it, right? Like things are changing so fast all the time. What felt to me like an accurate representation of what was happening, by the time this article came out, it was already somewhat dated. And so I'm more interested in the concepts and the ideas and the what more than the like where. I think the where does matter, But I'm working with a colleague who is a political theorist in our politics and government department here. And we're writing this book about the concept of sexy and thinking about who gets marked by sexy, who decides what is and is not sexy. And so social media, sure, is one of those places, but thinking about that as part of a larger project in the world about culture and ideology and social and political practices, I think is sort of where things are going right now.
We were just in conversation with Dr. Regina Dolathy, who was discussing her work on plus-size Instagram models and the politics of visibility. If you want to read more about her work, just go check out this episode's page on the Psychology of Black Womanhood website. Big thanks for tuning into today's episode of the Psychology of Black Woman podcast, where we're bringing research into real-world conversations. If you're enjoying the podcast, we invite you to keep the momentum going. Share it with your community, leave a review, or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Threads. Every bit of support helps us grow and reach more people. And don't forget our book, The Psychology of Black Womanhood, which is available now. It's the perfect companion to this podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep using research to amplify the voices and stories of Black women.